Shabbat Shalom. My name is Noel Joshua Hadley, and hopefully you guys know where you're at. This is the Unexpected Cosmology. I need another drink. Hold on. All right. Well, one of the things about being live is that I can't mess up or cut out all my ums or my choppy voice like this right now. Just one more minute. All right. Well, here we go. So last week we were reading through Book of Wisdom. And of course, before that, we read through Book of Britain. There is no possible way we're going to end this book this week, and that's okay. Next week, I'm going to be starting my Torah portions. And we're, as I mentioned before, we're rolling back Deuteronomy, starting in Genesis, and I'm inviting all of you to take part in this because we're going to be going through the Paleo Hebrew. Of course, we're reading in the English, a translation from Paleo, but this is going to be very different than any kind of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, a Torah text that anyone has read before. All right, so here we are in Book of Wisdom, and my voice was fine until I went live, and now I'm can't talk, but fun of being live. All right, Book of Wisdom. And we ended last week on chapter 7, duties, obligations, and services to life. So we're going to be picking up in chapter 8, which is on page 35. Let me get there for you guys. Boom. And for everyone just now joining us, Shabbat Shalom. It's good to be with you guys. And I'm really excited about starting this up on YouTube Live every single Friday night, 7 p.m. Hopefully I can make this a tradition for you and your household as well. And you guys can join me as I look at different texts. And I'm hoping that with the starting of the Torah portions next week, that I could still squeeze in Book of Wisdom, maybe do a little bit of Torah portions, a little bit of wisdom, and move on from there. It'll be a learning curve. All right, chapter 8. This is terrible. That's like I don't know what's happening. All right. Chapter 8, respect for the rights of others. And it's funny. I had calm, serene in my house. And right before I went live, there was a stampede upstairs and my baby was crying outside and a train was passing by. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. All right. Chapter 8. Do not enter a house other than your own, uninvited. And if you have a position of power, do not use it to gain entry into the house of another. Do not enter a house when the occupier is absent, even if it is open. If at any time you are denied admittance to a house or told to go away, then depart in peace. I mean, this seems pretty straightforward. Only in the interest of justice or peace, or when the safety of another demands it, should the privacy of a home be invaded. And even then, only with the greatest restraint and consideration. Now, this reminds me right here of Deuteronomy chapter 19:14, and it talks about boundary markers. And in fact, from what we've read in here, I think all of this lines up and agrees with the Torah. And the idea of a boundary marker is that you're to respect. This is talking about the actual home. You don't just enter into someone's home. You don't evade it. And they'll dissect that more as we go forward. But it's the same thing with your actual neighbor's property. You don't move boundary markers. You respect the lay of the land. However, if a house is abandoned or empty, there is no harm done if it is entered for shelter, but it should not be damaged willfully. Nothing established by the hand of man should be damaged unless it causes harm or inconvenience which outweighs its usefulness. I think that the idea being put forward here is that you're here in the American South. There's a lot of abandoned homes along the side of the roads, the highways and such. Now, these abandoned homes have collapsed roofs and there's probably critters living in and that kind of stuff. And, foundations a little wonky. I don't know if you'd want to spend a night in there, but the idea is that, you're traveling, there is a house that is clearly abandoned and you don't know who owns it, but you need shelter for the night or something like that. It's saying what is the harm in doing that? But the idea is that everything in nature itself, everything is to be respected, and they're going to talk about this later tonight, that you should be able to leave this life making this world a better place, right? For the sake that you were here, it should be a better place. And that includes going into any kind of empty home. You're not going there to destroy it. That place is going to look better. Maybe you sweep the floor or something like that, right? When a guest within the house of, when you are a guest within the house of another, treat his family with respect and his possessions with care. If you damage anything belonging to him, make proper and full restitution. This is the law of recompense. When in the house of a friend, under no circumstances touch a woman of his family improperly or show disrespect for her modesty by word or gesture. And we've been through this before with the Ruach HaKodesh. What is the unforgivable sin? Well, it's being in contempt of court with the Ruach HaKodesh. And when you understand that the Ruach HaKodesh is feminine and the mother of Yasharel, you can understand that you can have you and the Father in heaven can not get along. I mean, you and Yahushua HaMashiach can not get along. You guys can just, be at friction. And, at the end of the day, though, it's kind of like guys on a basketball court, right? They get into a fight, but then 5 minutes later, they're playing on the court again. They get out. But you mess with the woman, the mother, the wife, the daughter, you are now outside the circle. You're done. It's over. You don't disrespect a man's woman ever. And so it's the same thing, that how you treat the woman or the women in the house says a lot about how you feel about the man of the house. And it goes on to say, note the way a man conducts himself in his own. So when in the house of a friend, under no circumstances touch a woman of his family improperly or show disrespect for her modesty by word or gesture. Note the way a man conducts himself in his own home, for this reveals not only his own character, but also the character of his womenfolk. And really quickly on this with, restitution, is that's what repentance is. If repentance isn't just, saying, I'm sorry, and now you need to deal with it. You need to deal with the fact that I've apologized. It's no, Yahushua talks about this of, he doesn't want your sacrifice. He wants you first to go to the brother you've offended and make it right with him. Full restitution. You go to those individuals. I've wronged you. How can I make this up? What can I do to fix this situation? You're actually taking on the mantle of responsibility for yourself. You're saying, I screwed up. I need to fix this. It's on me. It's my bad. If a man greets you with courtesy, then answer him in the same manner. For surliness displays a weakness of character. I mean, this is just good conduct. If a man in difficulty seeks your aid, cheerfully grant him whatever assistance you can, if advice or information is yours to give. Do not withhold it when requested, but never press advice upon another. Respect the rights and dignity of the poor, for they may have little else. Those who help the poor or needy with gifts or benefits, knowing they cannot be repaid, are not without gain when their life is enlarged. Receive all comers with a happy smile, and do not look downcast when giving something away. Otherwise, you set the gift at naught. So, I mean, if you're the basic idea of Yahushua HaMashiach would say, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, right? So you're not going and advertising this. Look at me. It's going to talk later tonight about the hypocrites, the people. It actually says that the hypocrites are the most wicked of people. And it gives a specific example. These are the people who do things publicly for all to see, and they can't even do something private. In today's world, it would be, it'd be virtue signaling, essentially. It's you're doing something that should be a private moment. You got your camera on and look at me, everybody, look what I'm doing. And those are the worst of wicked people. It actually says that in this book of hypocrites. Though freedom is the birthright of every man and one of the ideals which must be upheld, when it infringes upon the freedom of another man, it ceases to be genuine. Therefore, before you talk about your own freedom or rights, consider the freedom and rights of others. For if you are truly good, their freedom and rights are the most important. I can think of so much propaganda with this, not this actual passage, but in the sense of freedom. And, the last, was it 20, 30 years of wars in America where we are literally going and putting up dummy governments and American owned regimes in other countries, and we're saying that we're there to fight for freedom, and we're actually enslaving other people the government says it's at our benefit, but it's actually not. I mean, that's an illusion right there. I mean, you take away other people's freedoms, you're going to be losing your own as well. However, if others come, and this is really important here, I want to focus on this. However, if others come seeking to diminish your freedom and rights by force or legislation without conferring a benefit of equal value in return, they are to be resisted. Now, in this book, as well as Book of Britain, it talks about the greatest freedom a man should have is the right to his own personal space and his family. Well, let me just finish this first before I comment on this. But bear in mind that true freedom is another of the sublime qualities unattainable on earth, where though man may aspire to it and must, it is restricted by earthly conditions requiring service, duty, and obligations. So, all right. So the idea is that if other people are coming to take away our freedom, it is to be resisted at all costs. It's first and foremost saying that your freedom is not as necessarily important as everybody having their freedom. So if other people are lacking in freedom, it is not right for them to lack in freedom so you can have it. I mean, I'm thinking right now of, like, say, Jim Crow laws. All right. But today we have something else going on, and I'm thinking of the LGBTQ plus alien, alphabet agenda, where you have these drag queens coming into libraries and schools and that kind of stuff. And from their end, they're using this language that we are taking away their rights to exist by saying that you can't come in and disrupt my family. You can't come in and, and speak this trash to my children. But from our perspective, we're looking at this and going, no, you're actually infringing on my family, right? That is what you are trampling. You have the right to go exist in wherever you want, but you cannot come in and infringe on my family, right? You can't come in and trample it. That is to be resisted at all costs. Your family is to be guarded. That is the most sacred thing, and that is to be guarded no matter what anyone else says. And of course, it ends here by saying that you're never going to be truly free in this earth. And one of the themes that it builds up on is that everything on this earth, there's a distinction between the mortal and immortal. And we are actually, like, there's a dualism right now, that we are both a mortal being and that we have the spark of immortality. And the mortality, the mortal side of us, is here to build up and serve, or actually lead to the immortal. So as long as we are mortals, we're never going to have true freedom. All right. So if we're here just to serve the mortal self, we will never achieve the true immortality. And you'll see more of that as we go on. To be truly free, it actually says it right here. To be truly free, man must rise above his mortality and become divine. To attain true freedom, he must travel a road of many toll gates, and at each payment is demanded from his own supply of freedom's gold. So it's saying this is a journey, and it's going to cost you. In fact, it's going to cost you everything. Freedom, like perfection, goodness, and justice, is an end man must strive for, but he must also realize that its attainment lies beyond the realm of mortal limitations. Like the other divine qualities here on earth, It is best understood by contrast. And yeah, I mean, I think we went over this in Book of Britain, where sometimes there was a great line that I loved, where it said, sometimes the truth can only be understood through the contrast of lies. And that is so true in the world we live in, where we just look around, we just see lies everywhere, and you can't help but banking, the truth off of that. Duty, obligation, and service are the three inescapable elements of life. They love talking about, numbers of three: duty, obligation, and service. On the road to divinity, and for those of you maybe who are just tuning into this, if you missed all the rest, when it's talking about divinity, I have to keep repeating this over and over again. It's talking about becoming, in biblical terms, it's what Yahushua would say, that becoming sons of Elohim, and actually reclaiming our status as sons of Elohim. So on the road to divinity, they are the three burdens which have to be carried every step of the way: duty, obligation, and service. They cannot, of course, be without purpose, and so are also the great stimulants without which man cannot be sustained in his ascent. Take them away, and man slides backwards towards the low ground of the brute beast, which have no awareness of them. So they just talked about how divine qualities here on earth are best understood by contrast. So they've just given you one: the brute beast. The brute beast doesn't have duty, doesn't have obligation, and doesn't have service. You take those away, and people slide back into brute beast. And so we see that in our own culture today, where the idea of duty, the idea of obligation, and the idea of service is replaced with entitlement. And the entitled culture, I mean, you guys have seen the videos of like rampaging mobs in Chicago and Philadelphia and different places, Southern California, and they're just entitled. Give me, I deserve this. And they're like these brute beasts. That was the end of that chapter. Chapter 9, people and places to avoid. Avoid all places and people which conduce to evil. Keep away from hypocrites, for having a common feeling of degradation, they will congregate together, and it would be unwise to be numbered among them. Hypocrites tend towards evil because they serve its purpose, and therefore, having an affinity with it, they turn away from what is good and just. They are hard-fisted when the poor come discreetly seeking for alms, but are open-handed when approached in a public place. Surely the hypocrite must be the lowest form of man or woman. So maybe it didn't call them wicked, but it said that they are the lowest form of man and woman, a person who is all about publicly what, he gives. Look at me, I'm giving this person food or money right now, but they won't do it privately. If you meet a stranger who appears to be filled with extraordinary virtues, or who conducts himself with grace and good manners, do not hastily conclude that this is his true character. Go to the place where he lives and is known. Note his attitude towards his family and behavior among friends, and listen to what is said about him. Only then will you be in a better position to judge and to weigh him in the balances. Not so sure all of this works on social media today, because you can go on social media and you could get 100 different opinions about somebody on social media. But it is true, you go to their house, and that being said, I know that they're every so often, we have these people who are just mercilessly attacked online. And I mean, there's one person, I won't say his name, but I have been to his house many times, and I was shocked to see that he was like, I've never had somebody serve me quite like this individual. I mean, he had such a servant's heart, and I was, really amazed. And so then I read things that are said about him online. I'm going like, none of that is true. And I've been to this person's house, over several consecutive years, many times, and go, none of that is, you're not describing that person at all. Sometimes you have to go know the person in person before you can make those, character assessments. Let's see. There are many persons of a hypocritical nature who reveal their true character in one place, but put on a false display of goodness in another. If you accept a man or woman in haste and are deceived, then blame no one except yourself. The man who accepts another at his own valuation usually gets a poor bargain. Avoid those whose natures are. Oh, by the way, that's a great marriage advice for those of you who are looking to find a wife or a husband. And now, for a lot of us, probably a lot of my listeners are older. Maybe you've been married before, that kind of thing. But for those of you, if there's anyone on the younger end who is listening to this and you have not found a spouse, a good rule of thumb is to, if a guy is going to marry a woman, pay attention to how she treats her father. And the same thing goes with the man. Pay attention to how he treats his mother, because how he treats his mother, how she treats her father are good indicators. And that it may not be every single case, but generically speaking, they are good indicators of how they're going to treat you. Avoid those whose natures are shallow or superficial, even though they be attractive and pleasant. Shallow streams sparkle most, and weakest waters make the most pleasant sound. There are many whose understanding of friendship is mere companionship, and they neither seek nor know anything deeper. Such people should not be cultivated beyond acquaintanceship. No man really knows another until he has seen him exposed to danger and loss. Even then, he cannot know him fully until he has seen him when tested by prosperity and success. I love that line there, that you can't truly know somebody until they've been tested by prosperity and success, and also see them in loss and failure as well. I really like that. Avoid those who are seeking to benefit from your friendship. They are not for you. Friendship is a precious plant which must be nurtured in the good soil of sincerity and trust, and plentifully watered with loyalty and understanding. The man who presumes too much on friendship is unworthy of it. Avoid the loose woman, for even if she is beautiful, it may be just a lure over the pit trap. Let me lower that so you guys can read that. Do not become snared by your desires, or let your eyes drug your wisdom. I love that. Do not let your eyes drug your wisdom. The man who claps fire to his chest cannot escape it should say unburned. It says unbummed. You leave without your bum, I guess. But yeah, unburned. And he who embraces uncleanliness will be soiled, however delicately it is wrapped. Avoid an evil neighbor in a wicked neighborhood, bearing in mind that a man is judged according to his associations. This one's a little bit tough, I think, in the modern world. I mean, you can't really help your neighbors. Even if you live in the country and you have, a big property, you're still going to have neighbors. You can't select those neighbors. There are many weak characters who, while not desiring to associate with the wicked or live in the neighborhood, their neighborhood, will do so for benefit or to advance their ends. I would be curious to see how this plays out, because the writer is obviously observing something that was happening in his day, where there were weak characters, according to this writer, who, not desiring to associate with the wicked or live in their neighborhood, would do so anyways to advance their ends. Maybe this is talking about not like a not like a redneck neighbor or something like that, but maybe like a really plush neighborhood, like maybe like a Beverly Hills type of neighborhood, where you're actually around very degenerate individuals from the pop cultural standard, but you're there because you are benefited for being a part of that. Maybe that's how it works. I'm trying to really picture how this would apply to us, because a lot of us, we can't choose our neighborhood. I mean, we just live where we can afford to live. Unless they are prepared to freely admit their weakness, they are hypocrites. This is a good one here. Avoid the places of pleasure which attract the weak and bad characters. For if you associate with them, you cannot expect to remain uncontaminated. And here's the great line here. Bear in mind that the best person to associate with may not be the best companion, and evil places are generally more alluring than good. So the places that allure mankind most often are places that are evil, and they they attract companions, right? People that are not the best people to associate with. All right, chapter 10, neighborly living. When a man holds views directly at variance with those of his neighbors, they are incompatible with harmonious living. This is very true in my own neighborhood. He then has to decide whether the right views are held by himself or by his neighbors, and if by his neighbors, he must adjust his own. I think here this is just part of just taking ownership over your, recompense, right? And repentance. If you are truly repenting, you are taking ownership. You are realizing that it's not the other person, right? You're not just blame shifting all the time. You're actually recognizing your own fallacies. However, if he sees that the views held by his neighbors are wrong or corrupt or degenerate, and he fears he may fall under their influence, he must depart without delay. He must go to another place where the conduct and outlook of his neighbors will be more congenial and compatible with his. It does not matter how far he has to travel to. Now, a lot of you listening are going to probably connect with this, very much so. There's been a huge mass movement, to the Midwest, and not just in the truth community. I mean, you see the massive exodus out of California, and my wife and I left California in 2015 as part of the exodus before it was even trending. Before the U-Haul trucks were all like rented out and stuff, but they're going to Florida, they're going to Texas, they're going to different places, and then these these other states are like, ew, keep out of our state. But there's been a huge mass movement to like Missouri and Arkansas, and probably other areas, maybe like I don't hear about Kansas as much, or Ohio, but definitely all through there. And to live around people of the same sentiments, the same mindset. Where there is no one ready to take command in an emergency, or no one prepared to concern himself with the welfare of the neighborhood, then strive to be a man worthy of the purpose. So this is great right here. So what they're going to start developing is this idea that many people, they're leaders because they like the sound of their own voice. They just want to have people. It's really about getting attention, having people worship you, basically. But this is saying that no, it's your duty to. It's basically saying, okay, those people, they shouldn't be there. But this is your duty, that when you see something in need, you need to step up and just start doing it. You're in a storm, start taking a bucket and start throwing the water out, right? That may be the best example I can give right now. Pick up a weapon and fight. Do this even if it means having to neglect some study of the sacred books. For the man who serves his neighborhood well serves the cause of good. So, yeah, basically, there are circumstances that come up. It's going to take away from your understanding or your ability to sit down and read the Bible and spend private time with the Most High. But the fact of the matter is that if you're just there reading the Bible and praying and that kind of stuff all the time, and not taking when there's needs out there that need to be met, right? That's a relationship that's not working anyways, right? You gotta have to put one aside to actually go out there and do good, feed the widows, clothe the poor. I should say clothe the widows, take care of the widows, feed the hungry. You guys know the drill. As the whole man suffers for the errors of the hand or tongue, so that sounds like it's coming straight from the book of James, the epistle of James. So shall the whole congregation of the righteous suffer for the misdeeds of any one of their number. If a member commits a wrongful act, then the other shall put it right. This is so that every man shall have a feeling of responsibility towards the whole, and that the good name and reputation of the whole shall not suffer for the acts of one person. I like that. Everybody, basically, the flip of this is that I have found that those who complain the most, who whine the most, who point out the problems of other people the most, tend to be the ones who do the least. They're not lifting a finger. They're there just to be fed constantly, right? They're that person that they just need the holy books, the sacred books. Just give me, give me, give me. And they're not actually doing anything. And this is saying, no, it's everybody's responsibility to make sure that the community is healthy. If there is leaven in the community, it's going to start expanding and it's going to start taking over the community. It is everybody's responsibility to guard that. You can give so many examples on this, how it works. It may be no great wrong if one neighbor gives comfort to another who has committed some misdeed. But if a neighbor aids another in a wrong or covers it for him, he is no better than the wrongdoer. To comfort and to condone are things far apart. So I was thinking about this a lot, because it would be hard. I mean, I'm trying to think, like, what is an example of how you can comfort somebody without condoning? Because generally when we don't condone something, we shun that person. We're like, I don't want anything to do with you. And that happens a lot in religious communities, where you're just excommunicated for having done something wrong, instead of people coming and, comforting and helping to correct the situation and to bring you back without condoning. So I like that there. To comfort and condone are things far apart. Don't confuse the two. Whatever the problems of your neighborhood, do not isolate yourself from them, for if they concern the welfare of others, they are your concern. Strive to be on friendly terms with all your neighbors, and if you fail, let it not be said that the fault lies with you. Now, some of you know that I'm sure if I were to talk to every single person listening privately, you would all have your stories about, your neighborhood, your neighbors, things you're dealing with. And, we had a situation ourselves where it's kind of a difficult situation to be in, because we are the owners of this house. We almost have it paid off. We're going to have it paid off in the next year. Yay. And we bought it, I don't know, 8 years ago now. Well, the people we bought it for, they live about 4 houses up. And they were the owners of this house, and their children lived in this house. The children still live up the street, in the other house, and they don't work. Their parents are enablers. There's drugs and all sorts of things going on. And so the son feels that he has this connection to our house, which is not a good thing. And he was coming down and taking advantage of our property for a very, very long time. And we were trying to work with him. We were trying to be friendly with him, very politely tell him to get his, broken down. He would park just give you a quick example. He would park a truck in our driveway that didn't work. Like, we could have done a tow truck, or I should say our parking space. And we didn't. We were trying to be polite with him. We tried to work with him for like 3 or 4 months while he was trying to work on the truck. And finally got to the point where he was, he was doing drugs down on our property. He was coming down, stealing from us, destroying our property. I mean, it was getting worse and worse and worse and escalating. And, we finally had to, it finally crossed the line where we're like, all right, we're going to call the police on you and file a report. And he was here one day and he refused to leave our property. And, I gave him several warnings and had to call the police on him. They came and they wanted to arrest this guy so bad. They came and arrested him, of course, found drugs on him, that kind of stuff. And it's been, better ever since. But and the entire community is sick and tired of it. And they're trying to deal with this individual. And so on one hand, I love that the community is, they're all, not all, but many of them are taking responsibility and saying, we are not going to let this happen to our neighborhood. And, we tried for a long time to make it work. And it says here, and if you fail, let it not be said that the fault lies with you. And I think that in our case that, I'll highlight here, I think that rings true. Let it not be said the fault lies with you. If you have a neighbor in need, do not be tardy in going to his assistance. If you are not in a position to help, show that you are not indifferent to his predicament. If a neighbor falls into ill favor with the law of the land, do not set yourself up to judge him. If you cannot say anything in his favor, then hold your peace. The laws of the land and of your neighborhood should be framed towards the maintenance of peace and security. Therefore, it is your duty not only to abide by them, but also to uphold them, right? Like, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You can understand that these laws are put there, even if they're not the best laws. It says that in here, that some of them may be bad laws. They might not be good laws, but it's you're trying the best you can to get peace and security. Good laws do not need enforcing among the good, for their goodness declares itself to all. Isn't that an interesting thought? But oppressive laws chafe upon the neck like a yoke. The goat does not attack the lion, and sometimes bad laws have to be endured with patience for the sake of neighborly peace. So you get that? Like, for all of you, we are in a we are in an HOA. So for everyone is, if you've ever been in an HOA, you know about bad laws. And the fact of the matter is that some of these bad laws have to be endured with patience, because they are there because of bad neighbors. And hopefully you're not the bad neighbor. Hopefully you're the good neighbor. Those laws aren't there necessarily for you. It's for the others that we all have to endure. Yet if the entrance to his hole is threatened, a mouse will not hesitate to attack an elephant. I have never seen that. Apparently that has been seen. And men are no less courageous. All right, 11, the cause and its champions. The greatest cause any man can serve is that divinely designed for him and intended to be his. It is the cause of mankind, which operates within the divine design and bears man upward to the very threshold of divinity. So let me read this again. It is the cause of mankind which operates within the divine design and bears man upwards to the very threshold of divinity. So what it's talking about here is, again, it's kind of a duality where we are mortals and we're going to die and we're going to decay, but our souls, have the spark of divine design, of immortality, and the cause of mankind is to serve the divine design and to get us there into the threshold of divinity, right? To cross that threshold. That's our whole course, our whole purpose of life, the meaning of life. In these dark days, when many gods wage war among themselves for the supremacy in man, did you just catch that there? In these dark days, when many gods wage war. And I'm wondering if this is a reference to the 70 Elohim over humanity. And of course, we see this in our own day with, like, look at like the eye of Horus on the $1 bill, and we see a lot of Egyptian influence and the gods of Egypt here. And I've sometimes speculated, well, what if those gods of Egypt are actually ruling over the Egyptian government, right? So we actually see that the gods were. This is one of the ways that the Elohim, the 70 Elohim, they were given an inheritance, they were given land, they were given languages, but not even the Elohim respected that. They were warring against the other Elohim, taking land that wasn't theirs, and so on and so forth. They weren't respecting boundary markers. They weren't obeying the Torah. So let me read this again. In these dark days, when many gods wage war among themselves for supremacy, and man is divided against himself with the many conflicting beliefs, this cause is voiceless and unchampioned, yet already the champion is conceived and lies asleep within the womb of time, awaiting the hour of birth. The champion is the good religion, now safeguarded and cherished by the devoted few during the ages of its conception. This is the religion which will someday enter the homes and hearts of a despairing humanity. Now, I am under the impression that this good religion that is being referred to is the religion that lines up with Joseph of Arimathea. And we saw this specifically in the book of Brenton, that he was called the father of the faith. He is directly credited with that. He, of course, was a disciple or a Talmudim of Yahushua HaMashiach, But he was the father of the faith because he brought the Hebrew faith, the Holy Scriptures and the interpretations of them over to Britain, and he confronted the Druids. And so this is what I'm thinking that they're talking about here, is that it was still in its infancy. It hadn't exploded all over the world yet. This is the religion which will someday enter the homes and hearts of a despairing humanity. So they had the hope that this would take over the whole world. Enshrining the hopes and aspirations of mankind, it will endow them with life and meaning so that they can rise with man to the mountaintops of divinity. Only the good religion will stand forth and declare that man, given a cause sufficiently great, will be unconquerable. While other beliefs appeal for mercy or aid or beg forgiveness or seek to appease, declaring man to be weak and pitiful, the good religion will come to his aid like a life-giving elixir. Its advent will be the morning star heralding a new, brighter day. And in the light of that day, man will know himself for what he really is and will do the things he must do. He will then no longer be a child walking in darkness and ignorance, wringing his hands and crying because he is so weak and wicked. He will no longer crawl in the dust of servile humility, begging for mercy or for another to bear the burden of his sins. In the light of the new dawning day, man will be shown what he really is, and the dawn heralds will declare his divinity. Then, from out of the dust long gathered in the darkness, the new man will arise and stride resolutely forward towards the sunrise. Well, what can I comment on there? When I read this, I'm reminded a lot of what probably most of us have come out of Christianity, a religion that seems to really boost these individuals that where it talks about, where it's the line here, wringing his hands and crying because he is so weak and wicked. He will no longer crawl in the dust of servile humility, begging for mercy or for another to bear the burden of his sins. And you get that in Christianity, where week after week after week, and you just go through these cyclical, readings of the epistles of Paul, and you're not really learning anything. You have all these questions, and you have all these people that are just, they just need more grace and more grace because they're so sinful all the time. And nobody really knows how to be righteous. The only thing they're told is that Jesus is righteous. And so you just, you have to kind of point at him and go, well, I believe that he's righteous, so he's going to say that I'm righteous. And then, nobody really knows what the definition of righteousness and sin actually are. And, so finally, when you finally understand what righteousness is, and that there are people in Scripture that are said that they were righteous, like Noah was righteous, Joseph of Arimathea, Joseph of Arimathea, the father of this faith, he was one of the few in the New Testament that was called righteous. And the idea of righteousness is that you are conforming to the standard. Okay, so you're not just burdened by all your sins, and you just need more Jesus in your life and all this kind of stuff. Now understand what I'm saying here is that when you finally recognize that the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, which we're going to start reading next week, going through the Torah portions, it actually is the law, right? It is the standard. Okay, this is what you do to live a righteous life. And then you have Yahushua HaMashiach, who came to show us the way. That's what Book of Britain says. It says he came to show us the way, showed us how to walk, how to live. And so when you stumble and fall, you repent of that, you return away from it, you make recompense, and you look at how Yahushua HaMashiach is walking, and you start walking that way again. And as it says here, you stride towards the sunrise, the morning star, the dawn of the new day. That's a reference to enlightenment. Excuse me. The idea of the morning light that comes in, that's usually in these texts a reference to enlightenment. It's like a separate light from the sun itself. And I actually believe that there is. I believe that there is a separate light from the sun that comes through the day. And of course, Yahushua HaMashiach is the light. In the days of its awakening, the good religion will require leaders, and these will need to be men of exceptional qualities. They will have to devote themselves to its cause. And in Book of Britain, if you guys remember, it's like if you can't rise above immorality, don't even point fingers at those who are immoral. You don't even have that right. Don't even do it. So that when it's talking about men of exceptional quality, it means like you are living a life according to the standard. They will have to devote themselves to its cause without any thought of self-aggrandizement. Many men deceive themselves into thinking their desire for leadership is to benefit others. And this is what I was commenting on earlier. But in fact, they are really seeking self-esteem and power. Some cannot even see their true incentives or read their innermost thoughts because of the cloud of hypocrisy which surrounds them. Such men are not desirable leaders. And in fact, unfortunately, in the years that I've been, leading a ministry, and it's of course growing, I have seen, these kind of people come and go. And typically what happens is that if someone is, you can kind of, in a lot of ways, I think maybe you can evaluate this yourself, that if you are unhappy, I was giving you an example. I was telling this to my children yesterday, and my sons and I will walk into a store, and there's something that they're kind of like trained to think. Unfortunately, they learned this in Europe. I'll give you a story afterwards, but if they walk into a store and all of a sudden they start thinking, I got to buy something, and then they start looking around. They don't even know what they want to buy, but then they find something in the store and they're like, I want to buy that. And I'm like, no, I know you have the money for it, but you're just buying this on, you're kind of like buying with your eyes right now. And you need to think about this, and we're going to go home. And if this is something you're still thinking about in a few days, we can revisit it. But I had that talk with them of saying that, if you're going to walk into like a store, and you're going to live that kind of, like, this is going to make me happy. If I buy this, if I have this, it's going to make me happy. You're going to live a very disappointed life. You will never be happy, and you will keep searching for things to find happiness because you're attaching happiness to these material things. And it's kind of like that with people who are seeking self-esteem and power. And that's one of the ways you can evaluate yourselves. If you're just constantly unhappy all the time, and you're like, I'm not, you start thinking like where you want to be and you're not there yet, you're never going to be happy. You're never going to be happy. What is it? One of the maybe the Rockefellers, who are like the most evil people on the earth. I don't want to misquote the wrong person, but I think one of the Rockefellers was once asked, how much money is enough? Like, how much money do you need before you'll be happy? And I think his answer was like $1 more. It's always $1 more. You get that $1 more, and you will never be happy. All right. So it's the same thing with leaders who are just here to benefit themselves. And they're not desirable leaders. The path that good religion must tread will not be an easy one, and all who follow it will need to dedicate every effort, and the last reserves a resourcefulness to its cause. And this is one of the ways that, like, they're basically telling you that you're not going to really have true freedom in this life. I mean, we want the freedom to be able to pursue these things, right? But whether you have the freedom to pursue these things or not, you're never going to be truly free until you cross that threshold of divinity, of the immortal life. The faint-hearted will have no place in it, for a cause so great will need the utmost sacrifice of persons and purse. And I'm going to wait to talk about the faint-hearted person because they're going to talk about it more. There are men who are vainglorious leaders, knowing only outward and superficial values. Many such as these cannot even find the right direction or select the best path for themselves. Yet their vanity and ambition prompt them to presume their qualities of leadership. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I've noticed a trend in the last 10 years that in much of the counterculture discussions, like the truther movement and so on and so forth, that it's gone in a very much more spiritual direction. Like when the flat earth started, like almost 10 years ago now, it was very almost like earth based. It was very just talking about physical physical observations and things like that. And we would say, yes, this is biblical and this connects with the Bible. But now it's become much more metaphysical, and we're going into these deeper spiritual things. We've changed a lot in the last 10 years. But I'm noticing all these YouTubers and other ministry leaders out there that they promote themselves as a very spiritual person, what they talk about. But I don't get the sense that they actually really like do what they talk about. All right, I'm going to repeat myself here, but let's see, where was I? Many such as these cannot even find the right direction or select the best path for themselves, yet their vanity and ambition prompt them to presume their qualities of leadership. Still, they may be no more to blame than those who support them and follow a road blindly. When men are half-hearted in a cause or indifferent about the achievement of its objective, they are denied a true leader. If the leader is blind, he and those who follow him will end up in the ditch. The true leader is a man to whom all who follow him can look up in every way. That's quite the calling right there, to have anybody who, can be looked up in every single way. Where there are no true men capable of worthy leadership, and this is, everyone pay attention to this, strive to be such a man yourself. This is like, you're in a battle, just pick up a weapon and fight. If you find yourself in a battle, don't go around whining, complaining about how there's a battle and you're not doing your job. And you just pick up a weapon and fight. All right. Where no one is willing to accept responsibility or strive and be worthy of it, then take the initiative yourself. In this, there is no arrogance if you dedicate yourself to service, and not self-esteem if you recognize your own shortcomings and limitations. And that's so important, recognizing your shortcomings and limitations. Leadership and example are essential to the advancement of mankind, and where they are lacking, there is certainly no wrong done in their establishment. The criterion of a good leader is his own integrity and intent. When support is needed for the cause, it will be no betrayal if the infirm, the sick, and the incapable remain inactive because of their inability to contribute anything. All right, so if you're in crutches or a wheelchair or things like that, or there's probably things even you can do, but you're sick in bed. Yeah, okay. Just get better. Their sincerity and moral support may be all that they can give. Those who will be blameworthy are the wealthy or those able to serve who seek exemption by excuses. The man who can give most in any way should be forefront. He should not lag behind or lax in action. So obviously, the more you have, the more you're going to be judged. And this just goes right back to the parable of the talents. I mean, they're all over this in Book of Wisdom and Book of Written. The person who is this is probably a pre-existence thing. I mean, probably something to do with our former life in the world above. But the person with the more talents is going to be expected to use those talents, and they will be judged accordingly if they are not using them. It's like, if you have money, if you have wealth, what are you doing with it? If you're not doing it to further the kingdom, help others, pay other people, give employment, right? That kind of stuff. 12, the good life. Life is not altogether a veil of sorrow, neither is it meant to be a grim, unending struggle. Man is born into the world to make the best possible use of earthly conditions. And this does not mean that effort should be concentrated exclusively on the achievement of spirituality. I really like this paragraph. Things must be kept in the right perspective and a proper balance achieved. It is unwise to let thoughts dwell exclusively upon the spiritual realm, and this was never intended. Only its reality and ultimate attainment should be ever borne in mind. Now, whenever I read this paragraph, I've read through this book several times now, and every time I read this paragraph, I'm reminded of the movie The Karate Kid, and I don't know why, but I'll tell you why. Daniel's son in the movie, he's getting beat up by these jocks, Cobra Kai, right? And he stumbles upon Mr. Miyagi. You've probably all seen the film, and he's like, "Mr. Miyagi, teach me karate," And so he's like, "All right, show up tomorrow. I'll teach you karate." So he goes through day after day after day of like painting the fence, sanding the floor, waxing the car, right? You paint the fence up and down, wax on, wax off. You guys all know the lines. And finally, he's getting really frustrated. And he's like, "You're not teaching me karate. I'm out of here." And he brings him back. Say, Daniel said, he brings him back. He's like, wax the floor, and that kind of stuff. and or sand the floor. I mean, that kind of stuff. And as he's doing it, he's like showing all these karate moves, right? And Daniel is just like, his mind is blown. And he would never, up until that moment, he was never able to make the connection between the physical world and the spiritual world, and how they both are exclusively the mortal and the immortal are both, in a duality. They're both blended together. And so the idea, so in this analogy of, karate, which is a very spiritual pursuit, the whole idea of the martial arts is to benefit all of life, right? It's to blend into everything that you do in life for a complete balance, right? And so it's the same thing, that if we're just looking at the spiritual realm and our head is in the clouds and we're not grounded on the earth, then there's something very wrong about this. As everything on this earth is intended to cultivate our soul and lead us towards the divine. That's another thing they say in like 100 different ways in this book. Man is to make the most of conditions as he finds them and get all the happiness he can from life without the framework laid down in the sacred books. Not only must he make the best of earthly conditions, but he must also improve them so that more happiness can be gained. It's almost like the people on the side of the highway, like picking up the trash, right? Like, this earth should be a better place when we leave it because we were here. That should be our goal, right? You go camping, right? And you make the campsite look better when you leave than when you arrived. You don't make it a worse place because you spent a couple days there. Though this may appear to serve only an earthly end, it is not entirely the case, for in the effort lies a spiritual development. Earthly conditions are not to be accepted passively, for every man has a duty to make some improvement, however slight, upon the earthly state of things. And of course, as you're improving the earth, you're improving your soul and the spiritual realm. Take you back to the paint the fence and sand the floor examples. While permitted to seek the greatest amount of happiness, man must bear in mind that the search must not extend beyond the bounds of his duties and responsibilities. When seeking spirituality and knowledge of the spiritual realm, man must remember that there are limitations as to what he can experience. You can only take it so far, right? You're not going to ascend beyond the firmament. It's not going to happen. The purpose of earth must and will be maintained with all its lack of stability and certainty. No mortal man will ever know for certain what the coming year will bring. The amount of spiritual experience and enlightenment permitted any man is just sufficient not to upset the balance of his life or nullify his earthly experience or existence. This is a fact which would be clearly understood by those ignorant persons who rail against the lack of divine intervention or guidance. In these times, mankind is not advanced enough for the divine veil to be any more withdrawn, and even in the greater light of the good religion, it will not be removed. Okay, so what it's getting at here is one of the themes, of course, in this is responsibility, that I have to be responsible for myself. You have to be responsible for yourself. And we can't blame Elohim. We can't blame the Most High. And there was a quote we read some weeks ago where it said that, people complain that there's not more intervention in this life from the Most High. And it's saying that if that happens, then we would have God to blame. We wouldn't take responsibility for ourselves. A good example of this is what Paul says in Romans. He says, wherever the Torah is, sin increases. Now, Christians will read that and go, see, it's proof of it's like, no. It's proof that you rebel against the Torah. And the example given is at Mount Sinai. We have an instance in history where Yahuwah, he comes down to the mountaintop and he makes his presence known there. Smoke, fires, trumpets, pillar of cloud, fire by night, cloud by day. And the people there actually rebel against him. They become more rebellious in his presence than if he wasn't there to begin with. I mean, think about that. That's an interesting contrast right there. It's an irony. that wherever there is righteousness, wherever there is the Torah, wherever there is the law, wherever there is Elohim, there is more rebellion. This is why the spiritual curtain cannot be separated. We're here. It's like Paul, again, to quote Paul, he talks about the glass darkly. I think he's talking about the firmament. We look up, and from the top of the firmament, you could look down, and it's crystal clear. You could see the whole earth from up there, according to multiple texts. One of them, like the Apocalypse of Abraham. You could look down, you could see the whole earth. You could see all 7 layers of heaven going all the way down to the earth. But from our perspective, we look up and it's totally dark, right? It's for a purpose that Yah, he covers himself in darkness. He covers his righteousness and his holiness. And we have to make do with what we have. But we're given just enough to get us there. We're given just the right amount of supplies and tools. And the problem is that we misinterpret them. All right. In these times, mankind is not advanced enough for the divine veil to be any more withdrawn. We read that. And even in the greater light of the good religion, it will not be removed. It's interesting. So as the true religion, and again, I am under the impression this is the religion of Joseph of Joseph of Arimathea, that even as this expands over the whole world, the divine veil will still not be removed. There will still be a mystery. There will still be darkness there. The 2 realms of spirit and matter, mind and body. So there we go. Material, spiritual, right? Mortal, immoral, must remain separated by a near impassable gulf, which can be spanned only by the utmost efforts. When the light of the good religion is given to the world, it will not be a world ready to welcome it or even ready to receive it. The world to which it will come will be a sick, disordered world, reluctant to take the medicine which will restore it to health. Now, what is the medicine? The medicine is Yahushua HaMashiach. Man, I wish I had that passage in front of you from the Aramaic Targum, Genesis chapter 3, where it talks about how Yahushua will be the medicine. In those coming days, the desire for the good life will have exceeded its proper bounds and for many become the sole objective. It will be a world of spiritual barrenness, a place where discord and disillusion has become lost in a doctrinal wilderness. Wow. With nothing more refreshing to offer than the waters of stagnant dogma. Like, this is right here. This paragraph is just wild. So we talk about the good life exceeding its proper bounds. So we've already talked about boundary markers. And, this gluttony will become the sole objective, just this desire to live this life of goodness. And they're going to rephrase this later on in the book. Then they've already talked about it, how this idea that man, the mortal, thinks that the earth is here to serve him. And it's actually, that's not the case at all. It is here to serve him in the sense that it is, giving him the proper tools to reach the divine, life. But if a person is thinking about his pleasure now, he has it all wrong. So this idea is that this world of spiritual barrenness, of disillusion, a doctrinal wilderness, man, that just reminds me of all the churches I went to, with nothing more refreshing to offer than the waters of stagnant dogma. They have these bullet points. You have to agree to these bullet points to go into their denomination or whatever. And even if they say they're non-denominational, they still have their bullet points. And, like, you got to believe in the Trinity, 3 dudes in heaven, this kind of stuff. And, there's nothing you can, the basic Protestant idea is that there is nothing that you can do. Nothing. You can't do anything good. It's, it's all Jesus. He does everything. You just have to believe in that. You have to believe in the historical person of Jesus, that he died and resurrected, and you just believe that. And then, of course, Yaakov or James would say, well, that's great, but even the demons believe and they shudder. So at least they're responding, what are you doing, right? That's why we have this stagnant dogma. We don't see the fruits. And no, there's some Christians out there. I don't want to dog on Christians. There's some Christians out there with some amazing fruit. All right. That's just fact. But there's a lot of stagnant dogma out there, and it's just like a swamp, it's just, you're not going to grow good fruit in a swamp. What man needs, the good religion will be able to offer. But as man is always tardy in accepting what is good for him and seems incapable of diagnosing his own maladies, he is unlikely to recognize the remedy. Perhaps the illness of man will then be too far advanced for the simple cure by herbal potions, and only the agonizing knife or cauterizing fire will affect it. They're talking about like gangrene here, like you're so far gone that you got to chop off a limb to survive. Meanwhile, wait and watch for the heralds of the dawn. All right. So again, the dawn light, the illumination that is coming of this religion. The body of man is perishable and only a speck of dust in the great scheme of things. Yet men believe that the mighty universe was created solely to serve it. Now pay attention here to what it's saying, because it's going to flip this. It's going to do something really interesting here. So men believe that the mighty universe was created solely to serve them. That's an error to fall into. Man, the mortal, sadly deludes himself by presuming to think he can bend all nature to serve his bodily well-being. As the fool, seeing trees and mountains shimmering in the waters, think their images are dancing for his pleasure, so man, while nature follows her destined course, believes all her activities only to gladden his eye and give him pleasure. Don't do that. That's the wrong attitude. Now, I will say that I do find images in the water, reflections, to be fascinating, because the image itself, it's kind of like it's an illusion. It's not really there. If you were to, if you can ever imagine yourself like you're on a rock and you're looking over a calm river, and you see the mountain on the other side of the trees and they're coming towards you. If somebody is standing to your left and right, they're seeing a completely different image. They don't see your image, right? That's the really fascinating things about images, that they're just so mysterious. Nature, like man, is intended to serve an end and purpose which far exceed any conceivable by mortal flesh alone. Yet it can be said with truth that the eternal universe and boundless nature exists only to serve man. Wait a second. Didn't it say the universe wasn't there to serve man, and that you're fooled to think it does? Well, let's see what they say. That the eternal universe and balanced nature exist only to serve man, the greater being. Well, there it is. So that's the duality. It's talking about the mortal versus the immoral. It is here to serve the greater man, not your mortal flesh. It's not here for that. It's here to cultivate you and to get you ready for a harvest, right? When harvest comes, that you're going to be that wheat that is able to like bow down, right, with the wind, but then come back up again. And they'll talk about that as well. Therefore, this being so, each man has a duty to recognize himself for what he really is and to do all that is required of him. He should strive to improve life, to supply something it lacks, and to leave the world a better place for having passed through it. I guess at the end of the day, this is why words can be such cheap currency, and people will say all sorts of things about what they believe. But at the end of the day, it's your actions. Your actions actually tell everybody else what you truly believe. All right. That in terms of, like, remember that DC Talk song back in the 90s, Love is a Verb. It was a good song. I mean, it is. It's an action, right? So, and the same thing with, how you cultivate the life around you and all the things you do. Like, if you believe that you are truly on a path to become a son of Elohim, like, and you want to do everything you can to make that assured, you're going to hopefully live a life that is going to live up to that claim, right? And if you don't, maybe you never really believed it to begin with. Maybe it was just one of those doctrinal statements that was the swamp, the bog. It talks about the stagnant waters that doesn't take you anywhere. The man who denies himself harmless pleasure is also a wrongdoer. I love this. The man who denies himself harmless pleasure is also a wrongdoer. All right. Pleasure is not evil. It's not wrong. And he is a servant of evil, for such pleasures serve a good purpose and proper ends. Happiness is not a thing to be avoided, and enjoyments which do not harm are not to be shunned. these books talk a lot about sexuality and things that make a lot of people uncomfortable. I mean, it doesn't shy away from it, and saying that pleasure is here for our enjoyment. Desires and ends which are good should be pursued, but bear in mind that the tree of desire will bear no fruit unless nourished with the waters of effort. Happiness itself is not an undesirable end, but too many pay for it with their contentment and peace. All right, so that line there about the tree of desire will bear no fruit unless nourished with the waters of effort. I can't state this enough. When Yahuwah is talking in the Old Testament, in the Torah, about you choose the blessing or the curse. The Christian church hates this because it's like, no, I choose Jesus. I get the blessing, right? That's not the way it works. You have to cultivate the blessing or the curse. If you live a lazy life, a life of entitlement, a gimme, this kind of stuff, I deserve this, you're not going out there to work for it. You're going to choose the curse. And so I love that the waters of effort bear the fruit on the tree of desire. You have these desires, these things you want in life. You can go out there and work for it. You want a wife and children, you can go out there and work for it. You want a house and a property, you can go out there and work for it. You want you have these talents that you want to cultivate. You go out there. Maybe the first job you get is not going to be in line with maybe your true talents, but you work towards it. And pretty soon you could nourish and bring forth the fruit of those talents. And one of the big things about this is, going out and taking care of the poor, the needy, the widows, and so on and so forth, the orphans. And I've said this in the past. I don't need to repeat it again about how I gave that story, I think, the last 2 weeks about Yahusha and, giving, using your wealth to give to people. But one of the credentials that I have for helping people, and some of you will know what I'm talking about, is if there are a lot of people out there who are infiltrating the Torah movement, I shouldn't say infiltrating, but they're coming into the Torah movement and they're demanding that we take care of them. Like they flash the Torah at us and they're like, if you are truly a Bible believer, you're going to feed us, you're going to take care of us, and that kind of stuff. And you meet enough of them and you start to find that these same individuals are going into all the different ministries and they're demanding things that they are entitled to it. We want your money. You have money, we want it, and we don't want to work for it. And they'll make all the excuses in the world. And those people are always unhappy and so on and so forth. They're going bad mouthing ministries, so on and so forth. And they come into our ministry a lot. And my thing is like, look, I'm happy to help you, but you got to work. If you're not going to work, I'm not going to help you. And it's different if you're like, if you're a cripple, it talks about that and you need to get better, fine. But if you can work and you can supply for yourself and your family, you need to do that. I can still, it takes a while to get off your feet. I would love to help you, but that's a requirement. And in almost every single case, they're like, nope, not going to do it. They just move somewhere else, start asking people for money. So those are people, in my opinion, that are choosing the curse, and they don't get it. They're not going to get it as to why they don't have fruit in their life. They just think they're owed the fruits because they have a doctrinal statement, and that's not the way it works. It has been taught that the love of pleasure, we're on verse 11. It has been taught that the love of pleasure serves no useful end, and that wisdom comes through pain. This is not true. For the spirit can also develop through pleasure, for otherwise it would be an unjust world. Now, they love to contrast themselves in this because they talked earlier about how the spirit is cultivated through chastisement, but they're not saying that pleasure is evil either. Not all school lessons are unpleasant, though all should be rewarding. It is nonetheless true that of all things man may do on earth to his benefit, the acquisition of spirituality is supreme. It is, in fact, the whole and sole reason for man's existence. There it is again, the meaning of life, guys. Therefore, you should find pleasure in life because you are spiritually developing yourself and becoming more attuned to the spiritual world. And if you're doing this correctly, then you should be happier. You should be wiser. You are finding your purpose in life, the whole sole reason for man's existence. Therefore, while getting whatever happiness he can, he should never overindulge his bodily appetites and should shun the frivolities of life. So again, don't tip off in the other direction. There's nothing wrong with, pleasure, right? But that is a distraction as well. It can be a huge distraction from the spiritual. These are earthly seducers, which leave little time for more beneficial things and become more demanding as they gain greater control. Such things as eating, drinking, sleeping, and the bodily union of man and woman are meant to be sources of pleasure when enjoyed in moderation and for their proper purpose. They too can serve a spiritual end. The rule is moderation in all things. You've probably heard that, a million times in your life. With consideration for the welfare and feelings of others and a complete disregard of anything which may serve the cause of evil. Do not fear the onset of old age, for though to the undeveloped spirit it may be the bleak winter of life, to the developed spirit it is the harvesting time. Old age is bodily preparation for departure to rebirth. It is the approach to the threshold of a new life. Another line I love. I love this right here. And you see so few like stories out there. You see such little focus on the elderly, obviously. And I hear all the time, like, people are like, they don't want to grow old and that kind of stuff. I do not fear growing old. I'm in my 40s now. I'm going on I used to I remember dreading my 20s. Like, oh no, someday I'm going to be in my 40s. What am I going to do then with my life? I love it, guys. I'm going in my mid 40s. I can't wait to my 50s and 60s. I hope I get to grow old with my wife and experience that with her. And I mean, I'm not old, right? I'm just in I guess 40s isn't even middle age anymore. I think they bumped it up to the 50s. Probably by the time I get in the 50s, they'll bump it up to the 60s or whatever. But it's a time in your life where hopefully you have gained wisdom, you have gained gnosis, and you are now prepared for your departure to rebirth. And excuse me, I need a drink of coffee. I was commenting on this to my group earlier that I've now seen all my grandparents are dead, and I got to see my great grandmother as well. She died when I was a teenager. She lived a long life, and with all of my grandparents that died, there was they all lived to be old age, 80s. One of my grandfathers died, I think, in his early 70s. He was a little younger, but he lived a hard life as a construction worker. But with every single one of them, they died kind of differently spiritually. And some of them were really surprising to us because we thought, they were churchgoers their whole life. They were Christians, always say the right words. And then as they were getting close to their death and they were getting closer and closer and closer, they started panicking and they started fighting against it. And they were scared and afraid. And they would start saying things that would really shock us, like the things that were coming out of them, some honesty on how they felt about Elohim and other things like that. And we're like, what? Like, you're just now saying this? And they didn't necessarily die well. But then we saw others who, one of my grandfathers, for example, he died beautifully. It was a beautiful death where everyone in the family was sad that he died, but there was just this joy. I remember such joy at his death because they're like, he died well and he died praising the Most High. And that's where we want to get to that point where we are prepared for that final lap, right? We've been running a marathon. That final lap, you don't want to fall to the wayside in that final lap. You see the finish line and you sprint towards it. Every man should earn his livelihood by service through toil or skill. The man who wishes to live the good life fully must engage in all kinds of activities and trade and in various instructive affairs. Life to be properly lived must be balanced with a knowledge of many things and a variety of experiences. I'm a believer that everybody should be paid for his work and for his toil and skill. And I believe in hard work. I'm a very, very, very hard worker. And Yeah. So I believe that people should also be helped with aid who are toiling in something that they are talented in, and maybe they need a little extra boost or something like that. And definitely, but if a man doesn't work, then they shouldn't eat. They just shouldn't. Man must certainly engage in worldly and social activities for the benefit of his body, for its needs are not to be neglected. Still, always bear in mind that this is not the sole aim of life, nor the greatest. It's not the meaning of life. They've said 100 different ways what the meaning of life is. Only one aim or objective should be held always in view, and that is the perfecting of the soul. See, they keep saying, how many ways can I say what the meaning of life is? The meaning of life is preparing your soul to become a son of Elohim, to reach its divine, return to heaven. You came from the sea of souls. You came down here to a world that, looking through a glass darkly, right? It's a dark world that we live in, and you are preparing and perfecting your soul for the return to cross that threshold. That's the meaning of life right there. And everything on this earth is meant to serve that end, not your end, not you now, but it's here to be a tool to get you to that point. You've been given everything that you need to get there. The problem is we misinterpret what those things are, or what the aim is for those things. In this way, all activities become praiseworthy and beneficial. I love this. I was thinking about this line all day. Since the end lies not in the activities themselves, but in their objective. All right. So let me give you something that I've said this before, but my wife and I we were like closeted Disney park freaks. I mean, this was a long time ago, back in the day. I mean, nowadays it's like, this is before Disney was like unpopular like it is now. Like Disney, like people are shunning the parks and the movies and all that kind of stuff. But we were annual pass holders at Disney World, at Disneyland. I mean, we would fly to Disney World. We were all this kind of stuff. Like we were like big, and that is an example of something in here that it was an obsession, a pursuit that did not actually, it was almost like the idea of the world is here to serve us, right? It was not leading us in a direction that was purifying our souls and preparing us for the world to come. A good example, though, what I love about this is that all activities, the end lies not in the activities themselves, but in their objective. And so if we are living our lives with this focus in mind, all the things we do should be leading us to that. Whether you're hiking, going on hikes, or I love to go swimming. If I can get into the swimming lanes and just swim a mile, I feel so good, and I just feel cleansed and everything like that. Those are all good activities that lead us towards that objective. If a man has any talent and fails to develop it, he is unworthy of the gift. That's straight out of Yahusha's mouth, it seems like, right there. And in due course must make an accounting, right? He's going to have to take an accounting to his master who gave him those talents, and be like, sorry, I was hiding it. I was lazy. I was on the couch. I wasn't doing anything. I was demanding people give me money. The man who does not continually expand the horizon of his life becomes stagnant within himself. The man who does not study and learn places himself on the level I read that wrong. The man who does not study and learn, he places himself on the level of the dumb beasts, though even they learn. Saying that a lot of the dumb beasts will learn more than a lot of people do. The good life is a balanced, harmonious life, and a life well and profitably lived. It is a life of many contrasts and experiences with a steady advance towards spirituality, if you're doing it right. All earthly goals are elusive, and their attainment may not bring the pleasure and happiness anticipated. There is only one goal towards which everyone can advance with certainty and assurance, and that is the goal of spirituality. The very things which defeat earthly ends and render them impossible to accomplish are, if viewed in the proper perspective, aids towards the achievement of spirituality. Out of earthly failure and frustration can come spiritual accomplishment and gain. If you can understand this, the good life is yours. So the idea is that you have a lot of earthly failure and frustration. Hopefully you're not giving up, right? It's like one step back, two steps forward, right? And you keep moving forward, and you keep moving forward, and you keep moving forward, and eventually you're going to get there. All right, I think we can probably get another couple of chapters done on this tonight. We still have about 30 minutes, and for all of you still here now, I should have said this at the beginning, but for all of you still here, we will be meeting at 9 o'clock tonight at the after party in the TUC Discord, and just talking it up. We're going to do that every single week. There's a link under all my videos for Discord where you can come over there. And we're going to make a tradition out of that. We used to do it on, of course, Saturday nights, but now we're bumping it to Friday nights. All right, chapter 13, the religious life, stopping for a drink of coffee. I get the feeling that they're going to be rephrasing the same things again and again and again, just till you just beat it into your head till you finally understand this. Religion is not something alien to the nature of man, but something which supplies a fundamental need. Just as eating is the response to an inner urge, so is religion the response to another. This may be one of my favorite chapters here, by the way. I really like this chapter. I probably say that a lot, but I really do like this one. It is only when religion in a particular form becomes insipid, ceases to nourish, that it is discarded, and then the nature of man seeks to supply the deficiency from another source. Without religious nourishment, the spirit of man becomes unstable and out of harmony with life. Unless the deficiency is made good, the whole being may disrupt into disharmony. The religious urge is as much a part of man as the urge to eat or sleep, though of a much more subtle nature. Some try to suppress the urge, and in such cases, the effects are no less harmful and apparent than when other surges are suppressed completely. Those with a little knowledge and wisdom often turn away from religion. But once they have gained much more, they turn back again. It's almost like talking about young people, young adults, men in their 20s, whatever, and they break out of the house and they go out on their own, and they don't have much knowledge or wisdom. They probably think they do. They probably think they know everything. They don't have that gnosis of wisdom. They haven't internalized it, and they don't live a very religious life. They make a lot of sinful mistakes in their 20s, but when they start gaining more and more knowledge and worldly understanding and so on and so forth, they may turn back to religion again. We saw that with Solomon as well, that at the end of his life, he turned back. Religion itself can therefore never be outdated or outmoded, though its earthly manifestations certainly may be. And so many persons, let me pause there. I seem to recall the words of John Lennon. I think it was back in probably the late 60s, maybe after the Beatles broke up in the early 70s. It's probably the early 70s. I think he said something to the fact that Christianity was an outdated religion, and a lot of people were saying back then that it was going to be done away with. But this is saying right here that religion itself cannot be outdated or outmoded, though its earthly manifestation certainly may be. We see a lot of trends within Christianity through the years. They keep changing in different forms of it and stuff like that. But they're all trying to grasp at this idea, this truth of the immortal soul. You can't do away with those desires, like it's saying in the same way that you can't do away with eating and sleeping. You can't do that. It's ridiculous. It's never going to go away. Religion will always be here as much as people desire it not to be. Now, continuing with what it's saying here, and so many persons disillusioned with the image, right? The image of religion, the falsehood of it. They spurn the reality behind it because it's like the phrase throwing out the baby with the bathwater. True religion deals only with the relationship between man and his divinity and is the stairway for his ascent. So if you're doing it correctly, it is understanding the narrow path that you are on that is getting you through that narrow gate. Of course, Yahushua HaMashiach is the gate. He's the door, I should say. Too often, religion is a quagmire into which the spirits of men sink and are lost, but it is the fault of men and not of religion. Each man has the religion he deserves and not necessarily the religion he needs. Wow. When it proves inadequate for his needs and he becomes disillusioned, he seeks to lay blame on the religion and not on himself. I have seen this so often with people who have walked away from the faith. They are blaming the image, the false doctrine that they see. There was a woman about 2-3 years ago now. She was kind of a social media friend. She was in my ministry, and she was a Trinitarian. And she wanted to write a paper because she knew I wasn't a Trinitarian, and she wanted to write a paper and deliver it to TUC, the Unexpected Cosmology, on proving why the Trinity is true. She asked me in advance. I said, sure, that's fine. I'll be happy to host that. I'm not a Trinitarian. She knew it, but be happy to host why she believed the Trinity was true using scripture. And as she was investigating, she was writing the paper, her whole world came undone, and she realized that the Trinity wasn't true. And she started freaking out, and she would call me up, and she's like, everything I thought was true was a lie. I'm like, well, you're being a little overly dramatic here. Like, just because you have the image wrong, I didn't use that word image, but just because you have that wrong doesn't make the truth behind it wrong. And I said, you're throwing the baby out with bathwater. She actually ended up leaving the faith because she disproved that the Trinity was true. She didn't know what to do with herself. She walked away. I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen something like that before. So again, it's what it says here. You have to blame yourself. It is your lack of knowledge, your lack of wisdom, or whatever. It's not the religion's fault. It's you taking authority for your own life, and being responsible for your own all the lies you believed, right? You believed these lies. You believed all these this misinformation, whatever. Right? Religions which nourished weakness of character and ignorance in men have been destroyed by those same failings and are no more. I don't know if that's true. They keep springing up all through history. But the religions are no more to blame than those who serve them. I would agree with that. If a man put to sea in there are some religions out there you hear that are so crazy. And I'm like, some of these have to be like intel and they're all filled with spooks. I mean, like I wrote a paper on Jim Jones. I'll be giving a presentation probably out eventually, but it's like, there's no way those were real people in there. There's no way. I mean, maybe there were a few like people, like sad souls who were really in there, surrounded by spooks or whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of crazy religions out there. Like, how in the world is this a thing? If a man put to sea in an unseaworthy boat, can he blame the craft if he be cast into the water? Still, man is never abandoned, and somewhere there is the religion he needs, though he may never find it because of his spiritual indolence. The religious life is not one of ease and indolence. Okay, now let me just back up here on talking about the religion he needs. Some of you will read into that this is like kind of a universalism, just pick whatever religion you want. I really don't believe that the writers of this book would be saying that, because they're talking about all the worthless religions out there. But I would say, though, that when we're looking at all these different church denominations, a lot of people are, moving to Missouri and those places to find congregations of like-minded people. And what I have found when I go out there and what I have investigated, I find that people go out there and they have like a midlife crisis, and just they're like, it's not what they expected. It's not the same like-mindedness people what they expected. And I say this because we can point the fingers of, all the different denominations, the Seventh-day Adventists and the Baptists and this and that and this and that. Now, you guys know that I hold the Torah to be true, but within all these different, beliefs, with these different denominations within greater Christianity, they're all kind of grasping in the dark for an understanding of the truth, and they're not going to get everything right. And I think that there are denominations out there where people feel more at home. They feel like that is more of where they need to be. So if they can find that spiritual growth in there, that they can cultivate their soul in there, then they're in a good place. To prepare for crossing that threshold. If it is holding them back and it is stagnant, then they need to get out of there. I think that's trying to sum up, I think, what they're saying here. The religious life is not one of ease and indolence, neither is it something to be undertaken half-heartedly. Too often, an old man who has wasted his life in worldly excess and scorned religion suddenly becomes converted and seeks to imitate the religious life. He imagines he has become good because he performs acts having an outer appearance of goodness. However, he is no more than a hypocrite. The truth is that his abstinence from wrongdoing and conversion to the religious life are directly related to his declining bodily powers. Such men generally become so self-righteous that they readily forgive themselves for their past deeds, which, after a shallow repentance, are quickly and conveniently forgotten. They should read what is written in the sacred books and learn how much more is required of them. So this appears to be talking about, like, kind of like almost like the deathbed confession type of thing, right? Where someone may live a atheistic life or a horrible life or a sinful life, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, I'm dying. Well, I guess I'm just going to repent." And this passage right here, I don't know what to make of this, because it seems to be kind of over generalizing. A lot of people do get to the end of their life and they realize that they look back at their life, they realize it was all in vain and it was all these pursuits that were worthless, and they see the truth and they do turn to it. That happens a lot in um, on deathbeds. One of the greatest examples of that would be the thief on the cross. Now, personally, I think that the thief on the cross is taken out of context a lot. I'll have people attack me for that, but it's almost like people use that as this ultimate example of, you can just on your deathbed, just convert, just say the right words, you're good to go. It's like, ugh. I think something else was going on there. I think something more than meets the eye was going on there, especially since this is the son of Elohim being killed. I mean, murdered and brutally beaten and crucified by the Yahudim, who are rejecting the Son of the Most High, the very person that they've been claiming to worship. And so you have this guy on the cross who's like going against all of that and actually having the gall, the bravery to stand up. Well, he was standing. He was hanging, I guess, but he was kind of standing, and declare who he was. I think that was like a very unique example. I don't think that it's. I guess I'm relating with this passage here, what it's saying. I don't want to overgeneralize. But there's this idea that you can just live whatever life you want, and on your deathbed, you just you repent and you're good to go. And I think a lot of people will have something else coming when they do that. But of course, Yah is the ultimate judge. I'm not the judge. Religion is man reaching out towards something greater than himself and attempting to express an indescribable glory revealed just beyond his grasp. It is man's search for greatness, the recognition that he is more than mere mortal flesh, and above this is a divinity towards which he may aspire. Devotion is not a state of servility, but it is actually an attempt to return to man's natural condition. It is a seeking for powers which, though once possessed, have now been lost. It is a search for the truth concerning man as he really is in his whole being. And so it says right there, what we have lost what we were. All right, we have lost our divine self. We were pre-existed. Something happened. We don't really know what happened, but something happened that we are in a state of rebellion. Actually, it's interesting. I'm going to mispronounce his name. I apologize, but Origen, one of the early church fathers, and I know I'm talking about one of the early church fathers, he had some really interesting things to say. And he actually believed, of course, he was really big on pre-existence. He actually believed in reincarnation. I did not know that. One of the early church fathers was a huge advocate of reincarnation. And one of the things I love about the early church fathers is that they could say like some wild and crazy things. I mean, they could be far reaching in their views because the church yet hadn't come into this, okay, you got to have these doctrines, right? You got to check the box on these things. They didn't have that back then. And he talked about how that even the demons and the different spiritual creatures, as well as the gods, he believed in multiple gods and angels, that they every single one of them were in a fallen state. Even the angels that were serving in heaven, they were in a fallen state, and that everyone was in our present predicament. Either you're a human, obviously, or you could be a demon or an angel, and that everyone is in that state because they have to work out what they did in a previous existence. Really interesting. Incense, fire, candles, and ritual cannot increase the glory of the divine. Certainly, they may benefit man and increase his sensitivity, but he should not be hypocritical about their effect or insulting. All right. So, I used to do that like in my 20s. I used to like light candles and stuff and sit in a dark room, burn some incense. I'm like, ooh, I'm so spiritual right now. And it's like, no, you're being insulting. Like, uh, they're there for tools to increase your sensitivity to the spiritual world, but yeah, don't like overreach that. The sacrifice of bird or beast, the offering of gold and jewels may assist men, but in no way do they benefit the divine. Right, and that's like straight out of the book of Isaiah, right there, Yeshayahu. That he like the Most High became just totally just insulted at this. He got sick and tired of all the feast and the sacrificing and all that kind of stuff, because people were not being led in the direction of the circumcised heart at all. They were just doing all these things thinking they were something great, and they weren't. All the divine asks from man is wholehearted self-dedication to the fulfillment of the divine design. I full-heartedly agree with that statement. That's all he asks from us, is wholehearted self-dedication to the fulfillment of the divine design. The worshipful, ritual, and devotional acts are the manifestation of man's desire to take an easy path. They are no more than an interlude in his daily life, the acknowledgement that he owes some sort of obligation. The sacred books should be read often and diligently, for they are the repository of knowledge and transcending that which can be gained by the senses of men. The divine knows your heart, your intentions and inclinations, and therefore does not expect you to make the study of the sacred books too wearisome. The divine knows that some are sick while others are handicapped either by a life of movement or a life of restraint. Others are so tied up in the struggle for the cause that they have little time for reading. Many have to depend upon the literacy of others for the learning. Therefore, even one section at a time is enough if it is studied and meditated upon. It's just the idea of one day at a time, one step at a time, little by little. One step back, two steps forward, right? But you'll get there. Prayer is an exercise of the spirit. It must never be misdirected and cannot be used to change natural laws and effects for the sake of the one who prays. So this is separating prayer from witchcraft, right? You're not trying to change the natural laws of the universe for your benefit. Always pray in a place proper for prayer. And I love this line, what's about to come right here. Those who say no place is especially holy because the divine is everywhere may discover that they are unable to find the divine anywhere. Prayer is little understood, for it raises the worshiper above a normal state. It is a state of being wherein man loses himself in the spirit of divinity. To those great souls who know the true nature of prayer and its highest expression, it seems a miracle that after losing himself in prayer, the worshiper continues to live in the flesh. True worship, however, is not prayer, but the devotion of a life dedicated to the fulfillment of the divine design and the preparation of the soul for the crown of divinity. I'm not commenting on some of this stuff because it's just, again, they keep saying this over and just all these different ways. How many different ways can we say this? Repentance from those who have been doers of wickedness and then repent their deeds or confess the wrongdoing when dying serves little purpose unless some recompense is made by the death itself or by other deeds. More repentance alone cannot reshape the soul. So, I love though where it's connecting here, recompense. It's saying like, if you're truly repenting, then there's recompense, right? It's not just this good feeling you have, on your deathbed or whatever. Like, I feel good because I'm sorry. It's like, no. If you're truly sorry, you're going out to the people that you have wronged and you're making amends. Worship and devotion require effort. So unless specific times are set apart for reading the sacred books, for worship and dedicated service, no time will be given to the divine. Too often, men devote all their time to the affairs of the body and completely neglect the welfare of the spirit. You see how they contrasted that? They said, look, some of you guys, you have to get out there and you work. You're going to have less time to spend in the books. That's understandable. But then you also have to be, now they're flipping it again and saying, look, you have to be responsible for this. Like you can't just, you can't live in this imaginative existence where you're close to the divine and you're not spending any time with them. You have to set that time aside. You have to get there and learn the discipline of praying. And of course, reading is a discipline too, to be able to sit there and just read and read. It takes years. Ignorant men stupidly stir up many cares and troubles. They confront themselves with pointless problems and add unnecessarily to the burdens of life. They increase the number of trials prescribed by their destiny. They indulge in futile forms of worship and waste time in worthless ceremonial. They delude themselves by placing false values on their offerings. They fast and mortify themselves without gain. They go on time-wasting pilgrimages and seek new shrines. But from all this, they derive little spiritual benefits. Religious rituals and ceremonies are brought about by a desire for the mutual sharing of religious experience, as words cannot describe the greater glories which are inseparable from the religious life. The problems connected with belief and faith are no more than standpoints indicating man's limited means of communication. Therefore, let each man find his own path, and having found it, follow steadfastly through to the end. The many and seemingly conflicting doctrines which arise from time to time and in many places do, if inspired by the urge to spirituality, lead towards the same goal, the one supreme truth. They are like the many roads into the city which convey travelers from all directions. This is one of the things that has really comforted me. And I really like this line because you guys know that I love reading extra biblical books. I love reading a lot of different books. I mean, right now we're reading what's definitely extra biblical. We can all argue whether this is scripture or not. I don't think this is scripture uppercase. But you'll come across things in books where there are points of doctrine or beliefs that don't connect with something else in another book. And the canon people, one of the things, their mantra is that, if there's one thing in a book that disagrees with the others, we got to throw it all out. And so they love that, and they'll hold that there with all these other books. Go, see, we can throw out all these other books. We're safe with our 66 canon. This is all we need. And it's like, well, wait a second here. There are things actually like in the four Gospels. I mean, let's be honest. There are things in the four Gospels that when you lay them side by side, they don't always line up at the end. And so it's like, what do you do with that? Now, some people will fight me, to the teeth on that and say that's not true. But it is what it is. But the thing is that you come to the understanding that these books in Colburn are really big on the fact of saying that people who write these books, these spirit-led books, or prophets or whoever, they need to be very careful about overstepping their boundaries. That they need to recognize that they have these thoughts, they could be interpretations. The interpretations could be wrong, and they need to be very, very careful about filling in details that are overstepping the boundaries. So even though there are books that there may be details in it that may be wrong, and you have to go, well, which one is right? They still, let me see if I get the line here. They, even if inspired by the urge to spirituality, they lead towards the same goal. Now, again, I am not a universalist. I am not telling you to go to all these other religions. Obviously, I'm keeping within the Hebrew faith, but hopefully, you guys get the idea. It's one of the reasons I like being able to look at all these different books and being okay with things that maybe some things that don't add up into it. I still am able to push past that and see beyond and see that they are leading towards truth. They are like the many roads into the city which convey travelers from all directions. The conflict and discord between the many religions are caused by ignorance, by blindness in the material clouds of illusion, and by misinterpretation of basic truths. Rightly or wrongly, each man believes the road he travels to be the best and most direct. Now, to answer this here, this is almost a direct line from the Book of Britain when Joseph of Arimathea or Joseph of Arimathea comes over and he's confronting, I think, the head of the Druids. It might have been the king of that area of Britain. I'm not really sure. And he challenged him and said, okay, we're going to have like a contest here of doctrine. And I'm going to throw my best at you, my best theology. You're going to throw your best at me, and whatever is the true, we need to disregard some of your stuff that isn't true and some of our stuff that isn't true. And Joseph of Arimathea is like, sure, let's do it, and he actually wins them over. And so, yeah, so that I think that's kind of what they're referring to right here. Yeah. A true religion does, in fact, do no more than supply the medium whereby man works in cooperation with the divine. It is the means whereby the divine design is revealed and its purpose interpreted. Whatever goes into the makeup of human nature bearing the impress of divinity, whatever man does to unfold the divinity of his soul, that constitutes the religious life. So again, back on the whole universalist claim, and I've said this many times in the group, that Yahusha talks about this. He talks about with the separation of the sheep and the goats, the wheat and the tares, and all this kind of stuff. That many people are going to. You guys know this. Many people are going to go and they're going to say that, Lord, Lord, and I prayed in your name and cast out demons and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, depart from me, I never knew you. He would say, you workers of lawlessness. That's the important part there, right? There's fruits. There's got to be fruit of the Spirit. There has to be an obedience to his commands, right? And then there's going to be people that are going to enter the kingdom, and they're going to be like, who are you? Like, they say this to the Messiah, like, and he's like, you fed me, and you visited me in the jails, and you fed me. And he's like, I didn't do any of those things. And he's like, well, to all those people you did it to me. And this idea that people who are, I believe, are keeping his commands. They are living a life that desires to keep his commands, but maybe they have been fed propaganda about Yahushua HaMashiach, or you say Jesus, whoever. They've been taught that he is a false Messiah or whatever, and they've never been able to push past that indoctrination. They don't have that statement of faith that we're taught to have in Christianity. That's all you need, right? You just need the statement of faith. That's it. You're good to go. Don't try to do any good on your own, because then you're spitting on the cross. It's got to be all Jesus. But you have people out there that are actually working to produce good fruit, to purify their soul, to seek that divine union with our Father in heaven. And they're going to go, and he's going to say, look, all those things you did, in my name, you didn't know it. I do believe that. That is, if someone wants to call that universalism, so be it. I don't believe it is. I'm not saying that all religions lead to heaven. I'm saying that Yahusha is a good judge, and he is the judge, and I'm not, and he will decide in the end who will enter the kingdom. And I think we're going to be very, very surprised who makes it and who doesn't. The course of life is determined by destiny, so pay no heed to those who pretend to read futures in the stars, for they predict only riddles, and what they say may apply to many. No two predictions are alike, except by coincidence, and the planets have no power to determine what a man will become. The origins of superstition and false belief lie in the conceits, and I think we're about to finish up here, guys. Yep, this is the last one, and we're going to finish up for the night. The origins of superstition and false belief lie in the conceit and presumption of man, but to an even greater extent in his mortal tendency towards deceit and hypocrisy. They also stem from his spiritual immaturity and indifference, for he tries to attain and understand things which are attainable only by the spiritually developed, and interprets them with his inadequate knowledge and inspiration. Superstition and blind faith are pillars supporting the religions of ignorance. All right. I'm going to sum this up. I want to talk really quickly. In a few minutes, we're going to go over. Thank you, everyone, for coming out and supporting this live, leaving your comments. Please like this video. And if you made it this far, then please, if you've actually made it this far, then you might as well subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. But I want to just comment on this really quickly again on those who are going to make it into the kingdom. And, it talks about all the ignorance out there and the darkness and the superstitions and all this kind of stuff. And there's, because I want to be real careful. I always have to be very careful about bashing Christianity, though I think a lot of you understand, because you have also come out of that. You have come through that cyclical weekly thing where you're not having your answers. You're being told not to be obedient. You're being fed lies and all these things, and you're trying to make this relationship work. And you have, it's like that phrase, Catholic guilt. You have this evangelical guilt and all this kind of stuff. And you're told that if you don't go to church, you're an apostate and all this. And it's tough getting through all that. But then you come over to a lot of us who've come over to this Torah movement. I am finding the most, I've probably never seen so many hypocritical fakers in my life than I have seen in this movement. People coming over here wearing masks, and they have the Torah, that's the same Bible that everyone else has, right? They're beating with, Christians will beat you with the same Bible, and they don't have a circumcised heart. I talk about this often, where they have all these things they check off. Okay, well, this is sin and this is it and all this kind of stuff. And they actually don't have that recompense, that repentance. They don't have that repentant heart. You don't see that in them. And there's a phrase for this: Torah terrorists. They're awful people. I don't want to be around them. I'd rather be around a lot of the Christians. And I'm finding that even though many Christians have been told that the Torah is, some of them believe it's witchcraft, right? They believe that, you're spitting on the cross. You're not to obey that. You're not, all this kind of things, the sacrifice of Jesus is to no avail if you keep the Sabbath day, and that's ridiculous, right? It's one of the 10. Or if you eat, if you refrain from eating pork, it's just the most stupid things. But they've been fed these lies, and they believe it. A lot of them really believe it, but you actually look at their lives, and they are some of the most giving, loving, passionate people with fruit, that some of them, and just incredible people who, I think when they enter the kingdom, and they're like, Yahushua's going to go tell them, like, you thought the Torah was horrible. You thought that it was this horrible thing, but you were actually following it pretty close, and you didn't know it. A lot of people, I think, we're going to be surprised who enters the kingdom and who doesn't at the end of the day. And it's going to be Yahushua that is going to judge each of our hearts. He knows our hearts. He knows the things that we do before we do it, and we knows why we do it. And that's one of the reasons why in our prayers we need to, when we are being repentant, we need to say, search my heart and reveal it to me, and show me my sins. Show me, what I am doing wrong, and give me the heart that wants to correct this, that wants to take responsibility for my action, the things I'm doing, and the things that I'm not doing, and correct it. And some of this is going to take years, years to figure out what it is to be a true woman, what it is to be a true man, what it is to be a true father, a true son, a true brother, and all the different, things, that the hats we wear. And it's going to take a long time. Anyways, with that, I want to thank everybody for coming out, supporting me. And of course, if you're watching this at a later time throughout the week, please consider joining us this next Friday night. Right now, our time slot is 7 p.m. Eastern time. I know that's a little bit harder for those of you on the West Coast. I may consider changing it, but I think we're going to keep it 7 o'clock right now. We're going to go over. I'll see you guys over in Discord, the Unexpected Cosmology Discord. I drop links under all my videos, and you can go over there, sign in, come over to the after party, talk to us. Good night, everybody.